Okay, good evening, everyone. We have right at 6 o'clock, so we'll get started. It's nice to see we've got about 36 participants. It's nice to see that number still growing. We have at least one important topic tonight, and that's professional learning communities and where we're going in D92 with that important tool to really impact student success, student learning. And so that's the core of what we scheduled this a long time ago for tonight. That was the only purpose. However, we deal with the reality in front of us, and we know that in the past couple weeks and as recently as today, hot topic is what's happening with schools and COVID. Parents, if you're just getting on, you may not have checked your email, but this evening I did forward you the brand new guidance as of today from the Illinois Department of Health on schools and dealing with COVID mitigation. So I will leave some time at the end to definitely address questions. Know that we have a Board of Education meeting coming up a week from tonight, next Tuesday, and that will be a topic that will be discussed at the board meeting. But happy to answer questions tonight. But like I said, the point of this evening is professional learning communities and what they do for your students, our students, your sons and daughters in D92. And what we'll do is, it's hard for me. I don't have someone monitoring the chat room. So throw something in there if you really need to, but raising your hand would probably get my attention more quickly. And we'll jump in if you need anything. Okay, so let's. Okay, can I get one of my administrators to text me if you can see the presentation? I'm going to go with yes, even if you don't text me. It looks like everything's working fine. Okay, so District 92 and what are professional learning communities? This comes from our strategic plan. You may or may not know that last year we spent a big chunk of the year developing with about 50 stakeholders a strategic plan for District 92 to lead us into the next 5 years. And that was a very representative group. We had teachers, we had parents, we had administrators, we had paraprofessionals, we had 6 to 8 students, our former D92 students who were currently either juniors or seniors at Lockport High School. Be a part of this too. And they gave us some of the richest information to develop the strategic plan because they had just been a student for up to 9 years in our district, had got a nice experience at the high school, and they were in a great position to look back and tell us things that we could improve on, and then what we were doing well, and how do we continue to improve going forward. So from the strategic plan last year, we have 5 goals. This is not about the strategic plan, but the purple indicator, and I just like to color code stuff, purple, nothing special about that. But this third goal is safe professional culture. And that's what the professional learning communities are really focused on. So of our 5 goals, student growth and achievement, learning culture, professional culture, partnerships, and resources, it's that third strategic plan goal that we're here to talk about tonight. How do we move that forward over the next 5 years? And the way we know this came right from the strategic planning committee is to advance that with professional learning communities. So why? We think in District 92, it's always important. We don't start something unless we're clear on the why. And I think this slide will grow over time. But after tonight, I'd be very curious to hear what you as a parent think is a why for why we should be implementing professional learning communities for student achievement. I can tell you what the research says and what experience says is that when districts implement professional learning communities focused on student learning, you can't do that well without a true focus on each student. I don't like to say the word all students. This is a focus on each student. Each student matters is one why. Why would a parent want to see us do this? There's the first reason. Your son or your daughter is a focus of what we do during professional learning community work. And this is work. It is a focus on each student's learning. I've got a slide later that will talk about, I bet when you and I went to school, I know when I did, the emphasis was on teachers teaching. That's their job, teachers teach. The emphasis is shifting to learning. Okay, I can say I taught it all day, but if the student didn't learn it, that's a different conversation, and we are changing that conversation. A third why, high expectations. We expect every student, each student, to be at grade level or higher. And we know we're not there right now. And this is pre-COVID, right? COVID changes all of this and probably makes this even more important. But even before COVID came along, this is where we need to be. Our only focus needs to be, how do we get each of our students at grade level or higher? That's the focus of professional learning communities. Why do teachers want this? Now, this is genuine. We had a professional learning community steering committee that met several times. They're still meeting for some training. And we posed the question to them, why are professional learning communities important from a teacher lens? And I'll read these. This is straight from them. It's a focus on each, all, and every student. That's kind of a combination of some. It's a way to improve professional practice, the art of teaching. It's a way to implement change from within. This isn't somebody doing this to us at the state. This is our educators who know our students and know our community, determining what's best for our students in order to make sure every student is at grade level or higher. It's a way for our teachers to see their students reach their true potential. It's dedicated time to examine and collaborate around classroom practices. We'll talk later about how, once again, when I went to school, teaching was very isolated. Most of us probably had a teacher where you went to a classroom, that teacher is with you all day, and that was it. There is more power always in a team. We do better for our students when we're working together, not in isolation. That goes to cross-curricular connections. Another way to say that is interdisciplinary units, meaning instead of treating a subject like there's four separated subjects, it's more impactful from a learning perspective to integrate that learning and show the connectedness of it. Here's another, these are all straight from the teachers on why. It gives us horizontal and vertical articulation. Okay, what is that? Horizontal articulation is up and down. So that ensures that if you have a third grade son or daughter, our teachers are well articulated with what the expectations are in fourth grade next year, so we can make sure they're ready. And we're really clear on what they had prior to coming to third grade and second grade. Okay, that's horizontal articulation. Another important way to articulate is vertically, okay? And actually, I'm saying those the opposite, so I just caught myself. Think of a vertical like a jump in basketball. So vertical is up and down, what I just said. Horizontal is like the horizon, it goes across. So horizontal articulation at third grade is ensuring that all third grade teachers are implementing the curriculum as it was intended to for each student. And what that means is each teacher brings their own art, their own personality. There's art and science in teaching. So that art part of it, where they bring their own self to be their best teacher they can be for their students, that isn't taken away. But the science of it, we agree that every third grader has these skills and these dispositions and this knowledge. We have to ensure that that's happening in every class. So it does not matter from an exposure to the curriculum standpoint which teacher your son or daughter gets. They're going to get the same high quality education in every classroom. Teachers, once again, bring their best self to that. So not every classroom will look and feel the same, but the content and curriculum will be taught. Assessment, a big part of the work that we do in PLCs centers around assessment. And the reason for that is, how do you know if the students learn it? Okay, like I said, going back to what I said earlier, If we're just focused on, well, I taught it, it's their job to learn it, then that doesn't work, right? How do we know? So diving deep into assessment results, and I don't mean the standardized test. I'm talking the assessments that our teachers have created. They know that it's aligned with the curriculum, and they analyze the results to determine, for an example, if a lot of students at a grade level got the same question wrong on a common assessment, then what's the matter with that question? Or what teaching needs to be emphasized or done differently to address that gap? Um, Job embedded professional development. All that we do around PLCs falls under the umbrella of professional learning for our teachers. Our teachers get better at their craft through professional learning communities. It's a really important time. If this isn't sit and get where you go to a conference, you take some notes, you talk to people and drink some coffee. This is hard work on teachers' part. And then everything we do is research based. We don't just do things because they feel good necessarily, but we want evidence that this instructional practice or this strategy will get us, in all likelihood, the outcome we need for our students. So it's research based, evidence based is another way to say that. So we've talked about the whys from a student perspective or a parent perspective and the teacher perspective. Why would a principal want to see PLCs in their building? And you're going to see some overlap in the next few slides. But first of all, it ensures learning for each student in our schools. We know through the evidence where our students are at and then what we need to do to close gaps that are present. It builds collaboration. It builds a trusting school culture. This is hard work. Think of any workplace you've been in. It takes a lot to build a collaborative culture based on trust, but where else do you need that more besides schools? Teacher efficacy and team efficacy. I'm a big self-efficacy person. I like to live my life thinking we're doing things to help other people see their own self-efficacy, whether that's students, whether that's teachers, whether that's people in my office or my own children. So PLCs really build upon the teacher's efficacy to make a difference, as well as the team's ability or efficacy to make a difference. Implementing a guaranteed and viable curriculum. This is kind of a geeked out term that I love, but you should, as a parent, scream at the top of your lungs if we can't guarantee that your son or daughter will get the same curriculum in every classroom at that grade level. Like, that is a foundational aspect that a lot of school districts don't do too well. They're loose on that. We need to be tight on that. And I think our teachers do a good job. PLCs gives us a way to really ensure that that's happening. So there's guaranteed. Viable is the other part. We only have so many days, so many weeks, so many minutes, so many hours in any school year. And it's been shown that it is impossible to teach all the standards and the Illinois learning standards in a given school year for a given grade level in a given subject. There aren't enough hours or days to do that. So our teachers use priority standards and make sure that the curriculum is viable. It can be taught in the time that we have to teach it in third grade, for example. For principals, it's a way to measure leadership impact. This is a way a principal knows, am I making a difference through my leadership? How am I supporting teachers so that they can make a difference in student learning? That's their question. And this gives them evidence for that. And then finally, similar, to what extent are actions connected to predicted results? So it's one thing to set goals and targets, but this is a very tight system on setting realistic targets for students and teams, and then making sure we hit those. And if we don't, we can learn something from why we didn't. And if we did, that's a celebration. Let's celebrate that we're setting targets for student learning and we're succeeding. Our teachers do that regularly. I think, especially after a year of COVID, but any year, we need to focus on that celebration of those successes. How about a superintendent? Why would a superintendent or board of education want to see PLCs? Once again, here's some overlap. Ensuring learning for each student. Notice that I and the board are farthest away from the classroom. So this is a way we can make sure that this is happening. It's a way that we know our principals are making a difference. It's a measurement of leadership and the impact of that leadership. Once again, it gives us an idea of to what extent our actions are connected to real results for student learning. That's what we're here for. That's what I signed up for, and all of our teachers signed up for when we went to school to learn how to be a teacher. We want to see student results. And then it is important, but it's the last bullet. It's a way that we're implementing the strategic plan. This is something that was thought through a lot last year. I will note once, I'm going to only say this once tonight, we're a year behind on this. We were supposed to roll this out March 17th, 2020. We should have had this conversation I'm having with you tonight last March. Guess what happened March 13th, 2020? That's when we found out that we were going to be shutting down schools. And instead, on March 17th last year, we spent time trying to figure out, we didn't even call it remote learning. It was emergency learning at the time. So we've lost time on this, and that's frustrating. But at the same time, we're going to do this right. So we go slow to go fast. What is a PLC? Let's define PLC. The P stands for professional, and that can get you thinking about things like we've already said, it's research driven, data driven, job embedded. It revolves around common goals and efficacy. Remember, efficacy of individuals and efficacy of the team. That's professional. Learning, the L stands for learning, which is continuous cycles of inquiry, meaning we're always looping back. I remember we said we're going to make some predictions, we're going to try some strategies, we're going to analyze the data. Did it have the impact that we want? Yes or no? And then we're just going to keep doing that cycle of inquiry. That's how teachers learn, and that's part of the professional development. It connects teachers' actions to student results. This is a very clear way to say when our team puts this in place, we get this result for students. Tremendously impactful on the learning process. It's a growth mindset. You can't go into PLCs or even, I would argue, teaching without a really deep growth mindset, because what is learning if it is not growth mindset? If you're not familiar with growth versus fixed mindset, what I will tell you simply is this. A fixed mindset would look at a failure and say, that's a mistake, I failed. A growth mindset would look at the same situation and say, what did I learn from that? How will I do something differently moving forward? It's much deeper than that, but that's my quick version of growth mindset. Focused risk taking. Think back to when you're in a classroom and you're trying to decide whether or not you would raise your hand and take a guess at the correct answer. That's a risk. You took an educational risk every time you tried, and sometimes you had it right, sometimes you didn't. That's an educational risk, but you made that, and it wasn't just a risk, it was you gave some thought to it. We do that, and we learn from that process in PLCs. And it builds our shared knowledge as a team, as a teacher team. I'll continue to use third grade as an example for tonight. And that third grade team, the longer they're together, the longer they are working on this student focus, on the focus of student learning, they will be masters of what does it take to get this done well for students. There's always going to be a student somewhere along the line that stumps them. That's life, right? They're human beings. But the collective is able to problem solve around that more effectively because they've learned over time what works, what doesn't work, and what can we keep trying. So we've talked about professional learning. The last is C for community. And we've talked about the collaborative culture. That's foundational professional learning communities. Teacher isolation is obsolete. We'll talk about that in a minute. But the days of a teacher saying, you know what, I'm an awesome teacher. I'm going to go into my classroom. I'm going to do awesome things for these kids in front of me. And that's that. I don't want to talk that down because we certainly want to celebrate awesome teachers. However, I don't get excited about that. I get excited about awesome teams of teachers who can bring up an entire grade level. I'm not focused on just a classroom. We need to focus on bringing up everyone, each student across the grade level. And that goes back to that team efficacy, which we've talked about. And finally, this definitely circles around collective responsibility. They are all our kids. If I'm a teacher in third grade in this classroom, I have a set of students that I'm primarily responsible for, but I still lose sleep about another kid in another class who's struggling, and our team hasn't figured out how to address that yet. I'm going to put some weight into that problem solving, and we're going to find that out together. There's a lot of power in that as opposed to being isolated, that collective responsibility for students. It's powerful. Okay, so 3 big ideas. If you remember nothing else, the next 2 slides are your biggest takeaway from PLCs. And we will make this available later. You can, I'm sure many people will want to watch this over and over again on their free time. But the 3 big ideas of PLC we've talked about. It's about learning, it's about collaboration, it's about results. That's it. Nothing else matters. Everything we do in PLCs fits under those 3 umbrellas. From a learning perspective, we ensure each student learns. Very simple. Very hard work, but the work is clear on what needs to be done. Collaboration. We can't do this in isolation. We have to build a collaborative culture. We're 100% focused on that. And finally, results. It doesn't matter what was taught if the student didn't learn it. So we have to be very cognizant of what is the impact on the student learning and how do we get that desired impact. Okay, so that's the one slide. You got to remember the 3 big ideas: learning, collaboration, and results. The second one's all the work we do in a PLC revolves around 4 questions. What do we want students to learn? And that's essentially the curriculum in one word. How will we know if students are learning? How do we know they learned it? It's a different way to say that. That's assessment. How will we respond if the students didn't learn it? If the students don't learn, what do we do? That's an intervention. And finally, how will we extend the learning for students who are already proficient? And that's enrichment. Let me go over those again, really quick and easy. I'll even say it simpler. What do we want the kids to know? How would they know how will we know that they know it? What do we do if they didn't learn it? And what do we do if they already knew it? Okay. So curriculum, assessment, intervention, how do we build that gap? And then enrichment, what do we do if they already know it and we need to extend that learning more? Okay, those 2 slides, 3 big ideas: learning, collaboration, and results. 4 questions around curriculum, assessment, intervention, and enrichment. That's it. Now, that seems simple. It's far from simple. This takes a long time to get right. This is the chart I was talking about earlier. So as adults, we think of school the way we had school. I went to school, I think it was school in 1972, I was in school. So I certainly had a great school experience. I had lovely teachers. They were wonderful. They were so caring. At the same time, I think they were focused more on the left than on the right of this. Okay, so this is a shift that we all need to start thinking about, why it's important for our students, your sons, your daughters. We have to shift from a focus on teaching to a focus on learning. I've said that several times tonight. From teaching to learning. I don't care what you taught. I care what the kids learned. From an emphasis on what was taught to a fixation, I love that word, to a fixation on what was learned. Once again, don't care what you taught. I care what they learned. From coverage of content to a demonstration of proficiency. I bet we've all been in a class where the professor or the teacher was focused on covering content. And if you took the end of the chapter quiz or the unit test and you didn't do well, what happened? If your answer is nothing and you went on to the next chapter, that means they were covering content. If something happened where you had to circle back and show mastery of those concepts before you moved on, that's proficiency. That's what we're striving for your sons and your daughters. We have to move away from providing individual teachers with curriculum documents such as state standards and curriculum guides. So here it is, go teach it, to engaging the teacher team, the collaborative team, in building shared knowledge about the essential curriculum. Remember I said earlier, if we just take the state, what they tell us is supposed to be done, it's been shown through research, there is no possible way. There aren't enough hours in the school year to do that. So we have to prioritize what's most important. And the only people that can do that are our knowledgeable teachers. And they've already done that. We have priority standards. So they're the experts at what needs to be taught, what's the pacing of that, and then how do we support students throughout that process. That's the move. And we've made a lot of that. We have really good teachers in these areas. Here's the kicker. This is where it's going to start really impacting moms and dads. Okay. How do we do PLCs? It has to be embedded in the professional day. Has to. PLCs do not work if it's an add-on. It's not something you do on a Saturday. It's not something you do in the evening as a meeting. It has to be integrated into the day. And you know where I'm going because, or maybe you don't, but it has to be dedicated time, 60 minutes every week. Now, let me pause here for a second. 60 minutes every week out of the day. What that means to you as a parent is that we have to have every week either a late start by an hour or an early dismissal by an hour. I'm going to have a parent survey going out tomorrow asking if you have a preference on that. I don't know if that'll be a 50-50 response. I don't know. We'll have to see. But we want to know from a parent perspective, we know this will impact your start of your day or the end of the student's day once a week. So what would be your preference? And then we certainly want to honor that. If we get a big swing one direction or the other, we'll try to go down that road. How else do we do PLCs? The feedback loops. There's important feedback loops between principals and the PLC team every week. Those principals aren't a member of the PLC team because they're not a teacher expert, but they're always engaged with the work that's going on in the PLCs in their building. I won't go into this last bullet, but we use, I remember I talked about the cycles of inquiry, similar to a plan, do, study, act cycle. And I've talked about that a little bit. I can certainly answer questions about it later. Okay, so I told you that we are asking for a late start. We need to have either a late start or an early dismissal. And if I was a parent and I didn't know anything about PLCs, I might ask, what are the teachers going to be doing? You know, you told me the 3 big ideas. You told me these 4 questions, but during that hour, come on, Tim, are they really going to be doing, you know, are they going to be like, I don't know, planning shopping trips or something like that? Let me tell you, our teachers are good and they don't do that kind of stuff. But if you ask me that question, I'm going to point you to this. These things are the only things that happen in a PLC hour. Okay. So remember, these are focused on the 3 big ideas: learning, collaboration, and results. They're focused on the 4 questions. Okay. What do we want students to know, to learn? How do we know if they learned it? What do we do if they didn't? And what do we do if they already did? Okay. Those big ideas and those 4 questions look like this in teacher work. They are either doing a curriculum study of knowledge and skills. That's a valid thing to do during that hour. Designing common assessments. That's valid. Designing effective instruction. Very important. Analyzing data. They're developing strategies to remediate or enrich student learning. What if they didn't get it? What if they already know it? And then it gives them time to reflect on their instructional practice. That's how we get better at what we do. What did we do? What impact did it have? How do we improve going forward? This is how you really empower teachers to do right on behalf of your daughters and your sons. This is it. This is what happens in that 60 minutes. Most times they'll do multiple of these. They won't do all of these every time. That's a lot of work. Sometime they might spend the whole hour designing a common assessment or analyzing the results of some of those. But a combination of these is what's happening during that hour. This is not fluff. This is not planning time, but it is planning time. Let me clarify that. This is not planning time, meaning the teacher can go and kind of, I don't know, who knows what teachers do during planning time? I do. I've been a teacher, but I know from a parent perspective, that seems like a break. Okay. Does this look like a break to anyone? It's not. Is it planning time? I would argue very much so it's planning time. This is the core of what teachers must be doing during their planning time. This is how we impact student learning for our students, period. There's no other way to look at it. So very important quality work from teachers. When do we do this? This is what I was talking about. We need to determine, are we going to do a late start every week next year, or are we going to do an early dismissal? I understand that whichever one of those we end up doing, that there's going to be a certain number of parents that aren't happy with that because they would have preferred the opposite. But we want to ask the question through a survey and try to give as many parents that as possible. It's also important for lead time. That's why we're having this conversation now and not in the summer. We want to be able to let you know, if not by the March board meeting, by the April Board of Education meeting, what this looks like next year. So you've got a lot of time to plan for that if there's any impact on your family. And like I said, we'll have a parent survey going out. So that is it for my canned presentation. I'd like to, let me reduce the screen. And that was about a half hour. I was trying to shoot for under 30 minutes. What I'd like to do is exhaust any questions there are around PLCs. Once we get to a point where that's kind of stopped, then if there's any other questions about our learning model, then we'll certainly talk about that too. So if you raise your hand now, I'd be happy to unmute you and allow you to ask your question. Any questions on professional learning communities, how we're looking to use them in District 92 next year? There's one. Okay, and Rose.
Hello.
Hi.
I actually don't really have a question about that. I attended your PLC presentation last spring, and I just wanted to say, like, I'm very excited. I think that this is a fantastic thing that our district is doing to invest in our students. And it's even better that we're giving our teachers the proper amount of time so that they can implement that in the right way. So thank you, and I look forward to hearing more about it.
Got it. All right. Let me thank you, Rose. I appreciate that. Not just because it reinforces this, but because I think it's accurate based on my experience. But let me say something that Rose said. She said, I'd like to hear more about it, or I look forward to hearing more about it. Here's the pressure on me as a superintendent. I know that there's a tremendous responsibility that when we start this next year, we are going to have to ensure that we're continuing to talk to our parents about this. We can't just do this and never talk about it again and just talk, because from a teacher perspective, we have a year that we're planning of professional development to implement that as we implement this. So we are working on some training for teacher leaders currently in the next 2 months that will then, it's not exactly a trainer of trainer model, but it's similar to that. Then we'll have those individuals who will be able to support the learning as the PLCs are up and running next year. And then we'll have checkpoints every month throughout the year, because our teacher teams, professional learning communities, to some extent is not new. Our teachers in different buildings at different grade levels for years have been carving out this partial time here and there to do some of the work. But it's frustrating. It's not impactful that way. When I said you must have an hour a week, you must have an hour a week to do this work well. Think of any project you did that was important that you stopped and started for a short amount of time several times. When we do it an hour a week in a very purposeful way and it's part of the day, it makes all the difference for that progress. But then if we don't keep telling you as parents what we're doing with that time and reminding you of the impact it's having on your children, then you're going to slip back into, oh, what's the point of this? They're just doing this stuff and I don't really know what's going on. So I do feel an amount of pressure to really focus on that communication next year to let you know what this is all about. Rose, I see your hand is still up. I'll lower your hand. And if you wanted to say something else, I'd be happy to bring you back. And Adriana.
Hi, my question would be, if I'm going to give an example. I'm not saying this is going to happen. I'm just giving an example. So say they were to start like an hour later, like once a week. I know the younger kids are like on the hour, like later already. So you have like a 7:50 start and we have that 8:50 start. Mm-hmm. So then that would put them at 8:50 and 9:50. Again, this is just an example. With those check-ins that you were just kind of speaking of with that communication, would that translate throughout the like the district, like that collaboration, would it go from school to school, or would that kind of just be like just like Walsh would be its own entity and Reed would be its own entity? I guess that would be my question.
Yep. So I have in my back pocket a way to kind of address that, but you said it exactly right. Whatever, okay, so you can't picture our school times now because we're in COVID. So think back to last year when we had a normal school day. What we're talking about is we all know that Walsh and Reed have a start time, and Ludwig and Eau Prairie have that same schedule, off by an hour, like you said. So we are talking about adjusting exactly that by an hour. So what I don't know today, will it be on the front end of the day or the back end of the day? That's what we want parents to tell us. I have a preference of when I'd like to see that, but like most of my life, my preferences don't really matter. I care about, and we care about, what our parents need. And if we see a swing one way that it really is better to do it either before, that hour before, or that hour after, then we'll go that route. But it would be, if the school currently starts at 8:50, it would start at 9:50. If it currently gets out at 2:30, it would get out at 1:30. So it's an hour for that. But I think you're also asking about the schools lining up. You would have some potential to line up the schools that have the same schedule. So Reed and Walsh would be the same. Oak Prairie and Ludwig would still be the same. But we also use teacher institutes for some of that vertical articulation you might be talking about. I've got one or two other ways we can do that, but it's more detail than it's worth talking about right here. Does that answer your question, Adriana?
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Got it. And Nikki, sorry, there you go, Nikki.
Hi.
Hi.
I was just wondering, I know for me, I've been a working parent until this year. And it's been difficult with my kids in Oasis when you guys have early dismissal days, because Oasis is canceled on those days.
Mm-hmm.
So what's going to happen with Oasis with the PLCs?
So we need to get the PLC. That's a great question, Nikki. And that reminds me of something I should have included in the presentation. Let me answer your questions in order. What's going to happen with Oasis? We would ask them to complement whatever we're doing. So we're not trying to get rid of Oasis. We would love to continue to partner with them the same way. But something that I think might be important that I think parents would appreciate is this would eliminate the early dismissals. So, right now, about once a month, once again, we haven't done that this year during COVID, but previously once a month, you would have an early release before lunch. Those wouldn't exist anymore. So it's, in some ways, that's about 3 hours of teacher time. And we're taking that away to put in the weekly 1 hour.
Okay.
Does that answer your question, sort of?
Yes.
Okay. We haven't gone deep into conversations with Oasis. They know that we value their partnership, but we need to figure out, are we talking before school or after school, and on which day, before we can get too detailed with them.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Nope. Good question. As a parent of 5 kids, I get the child care concern. So that's 3. Let's keep it going. Who else has a question or comment? Oh, let's see. Magdalena, let's see. There you go. Hi, Magdalena. You're muted.
Hello.
Hello.
Good evening. Very quickly, and maybe I was having some difficulties early on in the presentation. So this is my first time hearing about the PLCs. So maybe I just didn't hear, but my first question is, whose initiative is it to do these PLCs? Is it district, or is it deciding to do this, or is it state, or, just kind of to get some background on those, how the program, I guess, how that was developed. My second question is, so as I understand.
Before you ask the second one, can I answer your first one?
Sure, of course.
Okay, so this is a District 92 initiative. We would certainly love other districts to partner with us throughout the process, but this is just good teaching and learning for school districts. And no one is forcing us to do this. At the very beginning, Magdalena, I talked about the strategic plan that was developed last year throughout the year. And this is a direct result of that. The strategic planning team, which consisted of about 50 stakeholders, everywhere from teachers to administrators to parents to students at Lockport who used to go to District 92 and paraprofessionals, all created a strategic plan. And one of the 5 goals is focused on implementing a professional learning community model. So that's where it came from.
Okay. All right. Think
It's
I understand.
It's nice to be doing something that we aren't forced to do. This is not something forced on us by the state.
Okay, so I understand this is the D92 initiative.
Yes, correct.
Okay, the other question I have, so this is, as I understand, this is 1 week, a 1 hour a week, right? That we're
Yep.
talking about, where teachers spend time planning, analyzing. Now, do we know, I mean, I assume we are thinking of teaching 5.5 hours every day next year, or 5 hours every day next year, or, because I mean, to me, if we are going to be teaching the same amount of hours, which we are teaching this year at Oak Prairie, I believe it's 3.3 hours per day. That's going to be a huge impact. So I guess my question is, we are proposing to cut the instructional time. However, you know, what is the instructional time that we are going to be teaching those kids next year?
Yeah. So how do I answer this without, I don't have a crystal ball. All of my planning for next year is around the same kind of student day that we had in 2019, 2020 school year. That's about the most direct I can be, whether it's next week at the board meeting when I'm presenting on our staffing needs. I'm presenting a staffing pattern based on, actually it's a little bit better then, but based on a typical D92 school day.
Okay, so typical.
But you're asking me, so I can tell you what I'm planning for. You're asking me what it's going to be like next year. And if there's one thing I've learned, Magdalena, in the past 12 months is, I don't know if I can tell you what tomorrow is going to be, but I can sure have a plan A, a plan B, and a plan C.
You know, and I understand that it's just, we are kind of planning to cut the instructional time even further, right? Based, you know.
Yeah, let me address that. You said cut the instructional time a couple of times. Let me address that phrase. Remember that we've always had school improvement days, the early release days we were talking about earlier. It's
Yes,
about 3
yes.
hours, and we typically try to do that about once a month. So if you take 3 hours on one shot once a month, you're pretty darn close to an hour a week. You're not there, but you're pretty close. But that work in a school improvement plan structure, or in school improvement day structure, here and there, 3 hours, you lose time. It's a nice chunk of time, 3 hours,
Mhm.
but it isn't connected the way we can't do what I just showed everybody on the slides under that structure well. We can do parts of it, but it's not the same. You got a month between meetings. The impact of every single week is what we're after. And so when you do the math, yes, there is a reduction of contact time, not that much when you factor in the school improvement days. However, think of that Swedish term, less but more. I can't say it in Swedish, but it's something like
Mhm.
less but better. I said that incorrectly.
Right. Yeah, I think I know, understand where you're
I'm
going. Right.
100% advocating for, yes, there's a little bit less time of the instruction, but that time the teachers are with the kids is going to be so much more impactful. Here's the way you ask a good question. We talk about this with assessments all the time. If we're going to give a state test that we have to give, you always, if any test that you have a choice, if we're giving FastBridge, we always have to ask ourselves, we're losing instruction time. So is the lost time for instruction worth the information we're going to get out of whatever assessment we're doing? It better be. If it's not, we should not be taking time out to do that test. Now, I don't have a choice over the state test, but the other test we do. So we haven't solved all that problem in D92, but I would apply the same principle to this. I feel like, and all the parents on here have heard me advocate for the reason I've been pushing so hard to get this hour back of asynchronous into synchronous is that, especially after COVID, our teachers, we all know we need every minute with the kids. So if you believe that I believe that, if you think I'm lying, just tell me I'm lying, but not you personally, Magdalena. But if we as a district believe every minute is crucial with our students, then we better be sure that when we do PLCs, that hour is more than worth it for what's going to happen to our kids in the classroom. And I believe that is, and our teachers believe that's what it is. We owe that to our students, and we owe that to our parents to make sure that happens.
Okay, well, thank you for the explanation. I mean,
I
and
can't
you
tell
can
you what
probably
next year's
understand,
model is going to be, but I can tell you what I'm
right?
talking for.
Right. Thank you. I guess, you know, you can also understand where I'm coming from, and because we've had our communication this year. So, and I understand the purpose of what you're trying to do. It's just, you know, I believe we should take one step at a time, I guess, right? Get those kids in school first with the proper amount of instructional time they should get, right? Normally in a normal setting. And then, of course, start, you know, thinking the next step.
I understand that perspective. I see it differently, but I totally understand that perspective. It's valid.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome. Who else? Everybody's asking good questions tonight. Okay, let me do a quick chat. Okay. All right. With that, if there's any questions that I can answer, I did promise that we take some time to address questions about the learning model. So if we want to shift from PLCs and talk about learning during a pandemic, now is the time. I'm really good on wait time, but man, it's tempting just to say, okay, I don't see anything. Oh, Magdalena, there you are. Okay, let's see. Okay. Yes.
Just really quickly, I had a question regarding supervised lunch at K through 5. As I understand from your email, the lunches will be offered in class, right? And who is going to supervise these kids in each class? That's my question.
Adults.
Is it going to be, but it's not going to be teachers, right? It's going to be community members.
Oh, geez, no. Teachers need a duty-free. The teachers
Right.
are working their tails off. They need a 30-minute duty-free lunch. So it will not be the classroom teacher.
Right. Okay. And so it's going to be other, you know, staff, D92 staff, right?
Adults. Yes. I can't, I mean, once again, you're getting kind of in the weeds there, but I don't have the names of everybody, but that's
Right, I
what our
understand.
principals are working on this year to determine exactly how many and what we need. We are very open to parent volunteers. I've had a number of parents throughout the year suggest that to me. I would be very comfortable with that, but we certainly would start with D92 staff.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Yep. Oh, let's see, here we go. Is this
Hi,
Michelle?
Ken. Yes, hi.
Hi, how's it going?
Good, how are you?
Good.
My question with adding on the extra hour and a half a day, I understand the 30 minutes for lunch and in the classroom supervised by adults. Since it's getting nicer outside, is there going to be time for the kids to be able to get outside, even if it's just on a socially distanced walk or?
Yeah, I want our kids to be able to get out and run. I don't want them to socially distance walk. I want them to get outside and just run to the fence and back. It will be 30 minutes is what we're looking at right now. And 30 minutes for the entire lunch period. Now, keep in mind, that we had to keep rethinking what lunch looks like in this situation. They already have lunch. They're not going through the lunch line, getting all their food the way we always have in schools. So they have a lunch in their room. They sit at their desk and eat it. And I've got to imagine, it's been a while since I've had a third grader, but I've got to imagine that my kids, when they're in third grade, would have eaten pretty quickly just sitting at their desk. This isn't time to really socialize. We want this to be kind of calm. We don't want kids running around the classroom, obviously. We've got to maintain that distance. So if you gave, I think, one of my kids a lunch and said, here you go, eat your lunch, they're not going to take the full 30 minutes. They're going to take something less than that. And so we're working on a system that as soon as the student is finished with their lunch, they get it thrown away, they wipe down their desk, and then they go outside and have some fun. Wouldn't it be great to have outside recess today? So
Yes.
that's our goal. Get some fresh air, run around. Obviously, when they're outside, they're 6 foot distance. They can take their mask off and just be human again.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Other questions? You guys are taking it easy on me. I thought this would be, I was sweating bullets all day worried about this. This is fun. Somebody took my challenge. Let's see. Is this Beata?
Hello, yes, it is.
Hi,
Hi,
Beata.
Dr.
How are you
Arnold.
doing?
Good. How are you?
Good.
Super excited. Hopefully the K through 5 get to go back on the extended time. We're looking forward to it.
Yep.
But I also have a 7th grader, and I may have missed it. I'm behind on my emails. As far as Oak Prairie, I understand there's a lot of kids, so they probably can't go back every day. Is there any discussion about extending their school day? And is it possible? Why or why not?
Yeah. So good question. Fair question. It's the right question. We didn't start the conversation about extending the day in isolation of just K-5, right? We looked at every angle under the old guidance, and this is probably where I'll remind everybody. If you don't know, I think Beata kind of mentioned being behind on email. Right before this meeting, like, I don't know, sometime this evening, I sent all of our parents an email with the updated guidance from Illinois Department of Public Health that came out today. We've been told and promised we'd be getting that, oh, you're going to get it this week, you're going to get it next week. I mean, that's been going on for months. And we knew something different was coming, but we just didn't know when. And so we had a webinar this morning, and the new guidance came out late morning. I spent most of the day talking with the principals, going over the guidance, looking at the impact. I didn't know for sure what was going to be in there. So what the answer I give you tonight with the new guidance is a different answer that I would have given you if we had this meeting last night. Last night, under the 6 foot distance rule, and I know the guidance says, I know all the other districts, I know what they're doing. I know the ones that are going in for their junior highs, all in, that kind of stuff. They're not doing it and maintaining 6 foot distance. And we've made the commitment all along that we would follow the IDPH CDC guidance. And I know that it says follow 6 foot when feasible or when possible, or words like that. We've always said we're going to hold true to that. And so K-5, we were able to do that in the classrooms during lunch and extend the time. Junior high, not possible. We cannot do that under that guidance. Remember, the other part of that guidance, or you may not, is that the silliest rule of this is that no more than 50 people in a space. Now here's the silliness of that. That treats our gym at Oak Prairie the same as it does a bus, right? That doesn't make sense. When you're talking about an airborne virus, the bigger the room, you should be able to have more people, but that's the rule we've been under until today. Today, guidance came out, and I think the two most impactful pieces of this are as follows. The IDPH is not saying 6 feet or as close as you can or when feasible. They're saying the guidance is 3 to 6 feet. That is a game changer. That just came late morning. So that will change the conversation. However, we also can't do, if we're limited at 50 in a cafeteria, which doesn't make sense if you can space them out by 6 feet. They're maintaining 6-foot distance in the cafeteria. That guidance has not changed. You have to have 6 feet when eating, not 3 to 6, 6 feet. However, they've eliminated that silly 50-person rule, which means at Oak Prairie, for example, where we would have been limited to 50, now we can get about 100 kids in there, 6-foot distanced, eating at the same time. That makes it more possible to do what we couldn't do yesterday. So this is a very hot off the press kind of conversation. I would have told you yesterday, nope, can't do it at Oak Prairie because of what I said earlier. As of today, we're having conversations. We're talking again about what that could look like. So if you try to go, not you, Beata, but if anyone else tries to go deeper on details around this, there aren't any details around this. What I've done at this point is I've gone through the document, I've shared it with our admin team, I've talked to each of the principals, I've talked to some of our directors. We're looking at all of the changes to the guidance, and there's several in there. And my deadline for myself that I've self-imposed is the board meeting next week. I want to see if there's a way to communicate something different than what we've already said in last week's email. Attend the board meeting next Tuesday night, and I'm sure there'll be a good discussion about that. Fair enough?
Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate it. There's at least a little glimmer of hope for my daughter.
Yeah, the guidance is kind of rough, kind of boring to read through the whole thing, but I would encourage parents to skim it and just be aware of the rules we're functioning under. And that's why we make the decisions we make. None of these rules are because, oh, it feels good to do this, or we just thought it might be a nice idea to do that. We're taking your sons and daughters' safety and learning and social emotional well-being very seriously. And it's a balancing act. And I know, and I'm not speaking to you, Beata, I'm speaking to everybody. I know we don't always agree as a D92 community, what's the right balance, more of the in-person learning versus the SEL versus the safety. And I think we've done a really good job balancing that throughout the year. I know everybody doesn't agree, that's okay. But we know that we need to be in person more and more and more, and we're going to maintain safety. And we need I've said all along from day one, health experts will tell us what to do. And they changed the rules on us today that give us more options. So we're going to take that seriously.
Thank you so much. And we appreciate all that you do and the teachers are doing. I know it's been really, really hard year.
Yeah,
so thank you.
Thank you. They're doing great. And you know what? Every time I give the teachers credit, students, man, I've got a daughter that's a senior in high school. I know it's not the same, but I am not lost on the impact on our parents. I'm not at all. So it's impactful for everybody. All right, Rose.
Hello again, Dr. Arnold.
Hi, Rose. You can call me.
Hi. Thanks, Tim. I know that we all just got the IDPH ISB documentation today. So there's a million things to consider, but just wondering if it drastically changes the way in-person learning looks, are you up for considering letting students switch to remote for the remainder of the year?
Good question. And this is IDPH guidance. It's kind of interesting in there. If you read the details of some of that, they made it clear that what they say in this guidance overrules ISB. Kind of interesting dynamic there. But I don't see any conflicts with that. Your direct question was, yes, I'll answer that very clearly. Yes, I envision remote learning being an option through the rest of this year. And I'd be, superintendents are beating up ISB trying to ask, what about next year? We're trying to staff our schools right now. We're creating staffing plans for the next school year. We need to know, what are you expecting out of us for remote learning? And we don't have those answers yet, but I can't see a plan that doesn't include remote learning through the end of this year if people have chosen that already.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And like I know you don't have that crystal ball either, but
No.
thanks for being open to that.
Yep. You're welcome. What else? Okay, I see 6:59. When it hits 7, I'm going to ask for one more and then we're going to wrap up. So I'm giving you guys a heads up. Kind of fun to end right at 7 o'clock. That'd be kind of cool. That never happens to me. Magdalena snuck it in there. Okay, Magdalena, go for it.
I had to take that chance.
We're almost there.
Dr. Arnold, I just really quickly, so did I hear a glimpse of hope for Oak Prairie? You know my position regarding, extending the instructional time and letting more in-person time at Oak Prairie. I strongly feel these kids are way behind. I do understand they're older, yet older doesn't mean they do a better job learning, because they know the tricks of how to look up stuff on the internet. So there are ways, right? They do this. And so anyways, just for my clarification, and I did ask the question about who is going to supervise kids during lunch, because as you know, I propose, maybe you community members, myself, I can help at Oak Prairie if we just, decide to do something with lunches, or if we decide to extend the day. Anyways, did I hear that you're looking at the new guidance and you're might be making some changes, or is it, am I reading too much into this?
No, I'll be very clear. I don't like to tease people or I'm pretty straight with people. I spent a lot of time today talking to Mrs. Forcash about the guidance and what this does or does not mean for Oak Prairie as far as possibilities. And we are continuing to have conversations about what impact this could have for Oak Prairie. I can't give details, and these aren't decisions that a superintendent gets to make in isolation. I don't sit in my office and just decide this. So there's a lot of work we've got to do with individuals to get everybody on the same page. But I believe right now that we do not have a barrier with social distancing. The 3 to 6 feet is a game changer for Oak Prairie. That was the first problem we always had. And lunch was the second problem. And it appears that might be something that this different guidance gives us a solution to. But this literally came out hot off the press. I mean, we need time to process, and that's what we're doing.
Right. I understand.
Whether or not that gives you hope, I'm not trying to be sly or deceitful. That's accurate. That's all we're doing right now.
Right. And I was asking about the 6 foot distance versus 3 foot distance, and in my emails. So I've also been kind of, doing some research and looking at the guidelines and what the other school districts are doing and why. So that's why I'm asking. And I know that was a big barrier at Oak Prairie. So.
Well, it's been for the whole district. We made the commitment at the beginning that we were going to follow the CDC IDPH guidance about 6 feet until it changes. And today it changed. So we've honored that. And with a different set of rules, we're looking at what that changes for our students.
Right. Thank you so much, Dr. Arnold. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Okay. Last call. Thank you so much, everybody. We do have a board meeting next Tuesday night, the 16th. They start at 7 o'clock. It will be virtual, similar to this, and hope to see you there. It's a good conversation always. Have a good night, everybody.